Welcome from the IIBA Tampa Bay, Florida chapter. This is a study group for May 4th, and may the 4th be with you for 2023. This is our 76th class. Today we're going to work on the techniques out of the BABOK, the Business Analysis Book of Knowledge. We are planning on doing item tracking, workshops, focus groups, and perhaps estimation. The person that was going to do estimation seems to be a little bit late, so we might.
He's here.
He's here. But Jim, are you ready to do estimation? Let us know. Let me go ahead and continue this. Our mission here at the IIBA Tampa Bay, Florida chapter is to bridge the gap between industry leaders and business analysts by building partnerships with professionals, educators, and employers so that we may empower, instruct, and engage the BA community. You have a variety of ways to reach us. This is our Thursday night study group held between 7 and 8 p.m. Eastern time. We also have our past meeting recordings that are available to you. We'll drop that into the chat. We also have IIBA website, 2 meetups, Zoom, Facebook, and 2 LinkedIn groups. You have a lot of ways to reach us. LinkedIn is the best. We are sponsored by Watermark Learning. Watermark allows us to use their test study questions, and in exchange, they ask us to have them as our sponsor. We also have a discount code from them. It's Tampa with a space 21. That will give you a 20% discount on your purchases there. They not only have business analysis items, they also have a couple of other topics, things such as classes, study groups, recordings, flashcards, and practice tests. We are a volunteer-run organization. Our board is led by Cliff Gray, our president. You'll see him here in, is that the Millennial Falcon again, Cliff?
Yeah, that one's a Millennial. Yep.
That's the Millennial Falcon. He switches it up on me every once in a while. We also have Lori, Caitlin, and Priscilla on our board. My name is Thea Soren. I'm the Vice President of Career and Professional Development. My email address right here is available to you. You are allowed and asked to reach out to me to give me any suggestions on improvement. If you have anything you want to learn, let us know. If you need mentorship, if you need somebody to review your resume, whatever you need, that's what we're here for. So reach out. We do need new board members. If you have just a few hours you'd like to donate, either we can use a skill that you already have or help you practice the skill that you want to learn. And it doesn't have to be a full board session. It can just be a couple of hours. Just reach out. We have our study group advisors here. I'm very excited to say that Yulia is back with us. Here she is right up here. Yulia has been studying for her master's degree and is about to graduate. She's finished with all of her tests and all of her classes. So I'm very, very proud of her. Bob Churchill is our tried and steady CBAP. Both of them have earned their CBAP certifications from the IIBA. Bob also has a website, rpchurchill.com is his website. He has a whole bunch of really good stuff, guys. Please reach out and look at what he's got. If you'd like to talk to him about something he has on his website or ask him any questions, you can reach him at bob@rpchurchill.com. Let's see, other people that have been members of our study group. Yulia was a member of our study group. Tish was a member. Bonnie, Frank, and Renu have all been members and have all gone on to pass the tests of their choice. Frank is getting ready to take his CBAP, so send him good thoughts.
Frank is from Nigeria.
Yes, he is. Frank has actually been participating in our study group only by watching the recordings because he is like 7 hours off. But he credits us with a lot of his education. And Yulia, you weren't here, but he wanted to tell you he was really excited you passed your test because he got to know you through the recordings and then got the recording that you passed your test. He wanted to send his congratulations and his thanks to all of us who make it possible. And he really appreciates the conversation that we have. So with the conversation, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Bob. Bob, would you like to go ahead and start with either item tracking workshops and focus groups? And Jim, you can let me know if you want to do estimation this week or not.
Yeah, I'm on it. I've got my slide deck up and ready to
Well,
go.
okay. Well, Bob, would you like to let Jim go ahead and start?
Go for it, home.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing, Jim, let you have it, and you can go over estimation. I'm very excited to see this presentation.
Okay, let me share my screen. One moment. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
We can, thank you.
Okay, so estimation is technique number 19 in the list in the BABOK, and it's one of my favorite subjects as a former developer and a project manager, and now becoming a business analyst. Estimation is great fun, actually. And so what I'm going to go over in this presentation, one moment, are the BABOK estimation concepts, the purpose and description, estimation methods, accuracy of the estimates, sources of the information, precision and reliability, contributors and estimates, and usage considerations. That's all what the BABOK has to say about estimation in this technique. But there are lots of other sources that you can go to for considering how to estimate things. So I'll share some of my own real life experiences and invite you to share your own. Then we can go into a little bit about resources and references and maybe do some groupthink on good resources and references for continued study of the estimation technique. So BABOK estimation concepts, the purpose and definition for the BABOK, it's used by the business analysts and other stakeholders to forecast cost and effort, and it's also in pursuing a course of action. And so it's used to support decision-making by predicting attributes such as cost and effort to pursue a course of action, expected solution benefits, project cost, benefit performance, potential value anticipated from a solution, costs of creating a solution, costs of operating a solution, and potential risk impact. So estimation results can be expressed, they can be expressed as a single number, but in more practical uses, a range of values with the minimum, maximum, and the probability of that being true can be presented and can present a higher degree of effectiveness for stakeholders. So range refers to your confidence level in your estimate. It serves as a level of uncertainty. So the less information you have available, the wider the confidence interval becomes. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in detail later when I get into how we can manage that. Estimation is an iterative process. This is a big point in this technique. Reviewed as more information becomes available, revised if appropriate, calibrated by historical performance records and prior experience. And each estimate can include an assessment of uncertainty. So in other words, as we go along, we learn more, we get more data, and we reduce the level of uncertainty. We make that seesaw change directions here. And there are different methods that can be used to, as you go through an effort, re-estimate and recalibrate so that you can become more effective and reduce your level of uncertainty. So estimation methods. I kind of affinitize these a little bit differently than the BABOK, but they're the same ones that are listed there. There's rough order of magnitude, which is a high level with limited information. An example might be based on what we currently know the business analysis effort will take 400 hours. It's really at a very high level. During the initial conceptualization is usually when this happens. Pros are it's useful when limited information is available. Cons are it can vary 0.25 to 4 times the original estimate. So when you go in with a rough order of magnitude, you're really trying to say to a steering committee or a portfolio management group, this is going to cost us about $6 million or whatever it is, and they can kind of figure out, is this a very small project, a large project, an extra large project, but there are a lot of things you don't know. And so top-down estimation goes from a high-level hierarchical breakdown. So an example of this is to estimate the time required to complete the project X, compare similar past projects, and estimate the duration, adjusting for the unique aspects of the current project. So you're starting at a high level, and then you're breaking it down, and you're informing it with historical information. The pros, it can be used to get an early estimate. The cons, it may not have enough detail to gain more accuracy. So it's better than a rough order of magnitude, but still may not be as informed as you'd really want it to be. And then there's Delphi, which is expert judgment and historical knowledge. I don't know how many of you know the story of the Temple of Delphi in Greece and the story behind that. There's a fascinating historical geological reference book that I can give you on that to find out what happened and what the actual facts were. But essentially, the Oracle of Delphi could predict the future. And so consulting the Oracle, in this case, we're talking about expert judgment and historical knowledge. Individual estimates are shared with experts. Several rounds of estimation with average of 3 estimates are used. So experts share their information. They may say on round 1, estimates are 900, 1,200, and 2,000 by those 3 experts. In round 2, they said 1,100, 1,800, and round 3, 1,400 hours is reached as a consensus. So this is good when you've got a group of experts that can collaborate and provide their judgment and experience for an estimate. The pros are that it can be combined in any of the estimation methods, and it's better than a single person's estimate. So that's another point about estimation. Not only is it iterative, it's better when you have more people doing it and sharing ideas. The cons is if the group is not experienced or lacks historical knowledge, it may produce less accuracy. And I didn't misspell that on purpose, but that's not as accurate as I wanted it to be. So to continue with estimation methods, there's the bottom-up method. This means going to the lowest level of hierarchical breakdown. An example is that estimate each business analysis task or activity for a project, and then add the duration for all the tasks or activities into a total estimate. So you're going from the most granular estimates and you're adding them up to a higher level estimate. You'll notice I kind of affinitize these into more and more detail as we go down this chart. Usage on this one, it's useful in breaking down details as they become known by examining the work in detail. Estimate individual cost or effort, and then sum across all the elements. The pros is it's higher level of accuracy than a rough order of magnitude. It can be iteratively updated as more is learned. And the cons are that it prolongs getting an estimate until more details are known. And I would add that I think a con of this is if it's not used correctly, you may add up the sum of all of the small parts and come up with something that's bigger than the full project because people are padding their individual estimates. So be careful of padding when you get into these bottom-up style estimation exercises. Parametric estimation is one of my favorite things, and it's kind of the holy grail that I'm looking for, and I'll tell you at the end of the presentation what I'm looking for. In this case, you calibrate a model based on organizational history and prior knowledge. An example would be, on average, it takes 10 hours to elicit and document requirements for each report. We have 210 reports, so it will take 100 hours to elicit and document all of the requirements for the 10 reports. Usage on this is that it's useful in breaking down components when more is known about the functionality. Attribute values in this method reflect skills and abilities of staff and processes and contribute to accuracy and tailoring. The cons is that it requires a lot of research, planning, and historical knowledge, and it can create a false sense of accuracy if the details and historical data is unknown or skill sets are different for the current effort than are. So I'll tell you my real story how we actually use this form of estimation to come up with an extremely accurate model. And then finally, BERT. This can be applied in a lot of different methods. It's a method of weighting the average of 3 estimates. It's your optimistic plus pessimistic plus 4 times the most likely divided by 6. And the history of this is that this came up with it stands for Program Evaluation and Review Technique. It was developed by the US Navy in 1957 while secretly creating nuclear submarines. They needed to be able to estimate how long and how much it would take to develop a submarine. So they came up with this idea that if you added the optimistic, say a really low estimate, and the pessimistic, which might be a higher estimate, and then you weighted your most likely estimate kind of in the middle or wherever it is, times 4, and then divide that number by 6, you could come up with a pretty good estimate. And it can be applied at the line item level in parametric or bottom-up estimation, and can be pretty accurate. So it can be used in various estimation methods. I explained what it does, and it uses a standard formula across there. So you start getting more standard estimation rates. The cons are that it can be skewed if the most likely is optimistic or pessimistic. And it can also skew things if you're not doing it at a component level. The higher level you go, the less accuracy you tend to get. Any questions on the estimation method so far?
I have a question, Jim, on your parametric estimation. I'm confused about the 210 reports. I do understand 10 hours per report.
I think it's supposed to be 10, not 210.
Ah, good catch.
Okay.
I was going to ask the same thing, but I don't want to interrupt you.
I think that was a typo. I will fix that. Thank you, Thea.
Not a problem. You know, we live to serve. No, it isn't like you to make a mistake. And so I thought maybe there's something I'm not getting.
You don't know me very well.
That's why they communicate and iterate all the time.
We always improve each other. Okay, that was my only question. I understood everything else you said, and it was excellent. Thank you.
You bet. And thanks for the input on that. So the last one here is rolling wave, and we'll go into this a little more. Repeated estimates throughout the project. So an example is the BA provides detailed estimates for eliciting and documenting requirements from the retail operations team, and a high-level estimate for the analysis and subsequent modeling efforts for those requirements. Once the requirements are elicited, the BA can provide a detailed estimate for analysis and modeling. Usage, it provides a detailed estimates for near-term activities such as an iteration of work. It's extrapolated for the remainder of the initiative or project. The pros, when more information is available, the estimates become more accurate. The project can adjust resources and priorities and timelines as it progresses. It provides a higher level of oversight and phase gate ability. It may help stakeholders realize the complexity and risk points and thus be more involved in the details as the project story unfolds. The cons are that if expectations aren't set with stakeholders, that estimates often grow rather than shrink, and that estimation is being done iteratively, they may not fully trust the estimation process. But my experience is the more you communicate and involve them in the process, the more they appreciate the complexity and can kind of be prepared for the changes that inevitably happen on many projects.
We've got two hands up.
Yes, thank you. Go ahead.
The main thing I'd say you touch on an extremely interesting point, and that is about communication. If people know what's coming and they're kept in the loop, they can handle almost anything that actually happens. So, people are more likely to have super negative reactions when you catch them by surprise. So the more you talk, the more you're working together, the more everybody can roll with whatever happens.
Good
I
point.
think Cynthia has a question.
Yes, Cynthia.
Yeah, I had a question. Hi, I had a question about the PERT estimate. So when you provided the formula, there was 3 variables: most likely, pessimistic, and optimistic. So will this be numbers that will be given by the stakeholder, or as a BA, you come up with values to insert to?
Yeah, that's a good question. Usually what I like to do is talk to the people that are actually going to do the work and find out what their estimate is. So if I'm doing the work and I'm doing the estimates, then I would give, a range of optimistic and pessimistic. I would also give most likely. But if it's, say, a couple of developers that are doing the work, as a project manager, I used to do this a lot. Where I would go to those developers that were doing the work on that component, have them give individual estimates as a group, or maybe they have a lead person that supervises them and really kind of understands the standards for their work. And they'll say, well, most interfaces are 200 hours, but if it's an existing interface with a few tweaks, then we're probably talking about 90 hours. And if it's a really complex interface and we don't have specifications, you're looking at a 400-hour estimate. And then we go through and we do that multiplication on those 3 estimates. And we end up with something that's somewhere in the middle of weighted toward most likely, but with the idea that your variance could be much higher. Yeah. Did that answer your question, Cynthia?
Yeah, yes, it did. Thank you.
Good questions. So, talking about the accuracy of the estimate, the BABOK says that accuracy is a measure of uncertainty. It evaluates how close an estimate is to the actual value measured later. And it, sorry here, let me. It evaluates how close an estimate is to the actual value measured later. It's a ratio of the width of confidence interval to its mean value. So it's looking at how wide that confidence interval is based compared to the mean value. And it's expressed as a percentage. So you might say uncertainty type by type of estimates. A ROM estimate may be no more than plus or minus 50% accurate, whereas a definitive estimate ideally would be plus or minus 10% or less. And more real world data must be available, and more data narrows the uncertainty. So that's why iterative estimation as details unfold really helps narrow that percentage of uncertainty. Combining ROM and definitive estimates can be used in rolling wave estimates. And so you start out a project with a rough order of magnitude. This is the big tidal wave. And you start with that rough order of magnitude. The team creates definitive estimates for the next iteration or phase. And when they have detailed information, the remainder of the work remains a ROM estimate. So basically, you're looking forward to the next iteration and estimating those waves as you go, keeping aside what you don't know in the ROM, in the rough order of magnitude estimate. And then at each iteration phase, you go through and you approach a definitive estimate, which is made and the ROM estimates refined. So as you move forward, your accuracy goes up. You start narrowing what they call the cone of uncertainty as you know more. Any questions about those ideas?
I love the name cone of uncertainty, which is the difference from the cone of shame.
Yes, I've worn both cones. I've worn the cone of shame when our estimates were given out without a lot of detail, and I've helped narrow the cone of uncertainty on other projects that were willing to go through the work of doing that continuous estimation. So sources of information is the next part that the BABOK talks about. Estimators consider available information from prior experience along with the attributes being estimated. In analogous situations, using an element, project, initiative, risk, or other that is like the element being estimated. So in analogous situations, you're saying, oh, we did a project recently that included 35 healthcare interfaces. And so we know, since this new project is going to have, 10 new interfaces that are healthcare related, we know how long it should take to build those. Organizational history also provides a good source of information, and ignoring it can be catastrophic. I've got prior experience with that. The previous experiences of the organization with similar work are important, and they're most helpful if the prior work was done by the same or similarly skilled team and by using the same techniques. Expert judgment is another one, leveraging the knowledge of individuals about the element being estimated. Estimating often relies on the expertise of those who have performed the work in the past, internal or external to the organization. And when using external experts, estimators take into account the relevant skills and abilities of those doing the work being estimated. And I have a good lesson learned in the next part that relates to that, where we did rely on some experts, but they did not take into consideration our organizational history or complexity, and basically cut the estimate in half of what we had originally thought it would be. And I'll show you later how that turned out. So these are good sources: analogous situations, organizational history, and expert judgment. Okay, precision and reliability of estimates. So the precision of an estimate is a measure of agreement between multiple estimates. Again, it's the measure of agreement between multiple estimates for the same thing. So estimators examine variance, standard deviation between estimates to determine level of agreement. Reliability refers to repeatability, reflected in variation of estimates by different estimators. So trying to make the estimation process repeatable by using a standard process helps. And PERT can be used to provide estimates with a particular level of confidence. And I'll show that to you in this chart. Using multiple estimates for each component, a probability distribution can be constructed to provide an overall estimate as a range of values with an associated level of confidence. So in this chart, we have an optimistic estimate. This is an example of different confidence levels based on the optimistic, pessimistic, most likely, and showing the standard deviation and variance on those. So here, someone said, well, optimistically, I could do this work in 38 hours. Pessimistically, it's going to take me 42 hours. And most likely, it's about 40 hours worth of work. I would say that's pretty confident because you can see these ranges between optimist and pessimistic don't vary too much. The standard deviation is low, the variance is low, and the confidence level is high. Now, in this estimate, in the next line, it was 36 hours was the optimistic, pessimistic was 44 hours, and again, most likely 40. So if we went through the OP4M divided by 6, we get 40 hours. Notice we always get this, and I purposely did this so that these formulas all computed to 40 to show you that you can have the same PERT estimate, but depending on your optimistic, your pessimistic, and your most likely values, you can have a wide range from 1.63 to 16.33 on your standard deviation and 2.67 to 266.67 on your variance. So therefore your confidence level changes from 95 to 90 and down to 50%. So the OPM is reliable, but always look at things like you're optimistic and pessimistic and see how wide that range is. There might be a good reason for it. Like at the beginning of the project, you could have a very wide range here with only a 50% confidence level. And as the project progresses, you get it down to this top level where you've only got a 5% variance in your confidence level, and you're at 95%. Any questions about precision and reliability? Again, precision is the measure of agreement between multiple estimates, and reliability is reflected in variation of estimates by different estimators.
No question, but very, very nice slide. Thank you.
Thank you. So contributors to estimates, the BABOK says that individual estimates versus team estimates usually are more accurate than an individual estimate. Dedicated organizational estimation groups. Estimate reflects likely context of the element being estimated. What does that mean? So when you have a dedicated organizational estimation group, you're talking about people that do estimation all the time regularly. So they probably have expert knowledge of the organization and skills, and they also understand the context of the element being estimated. I've never worked in a group that actually had an estimation group per se. I've always gone to the developers themselves and kind of taught them estimation methods and helped them calibrate their own estimations. But that sounds like a wonderful thing to have. Compare independent external expert estimates to internal estimate and adjust. So when an organization wants a high level of confidence in estimates, they may go to an external expert who understands the particular domain knowledge to estimate or provide some comments on the estimations they've given. Finally, usage considerations for this technique. The strengths for estimation. Estimates provide a rationale for budget, time frame, or size of a set of elements. And without an estimate, teams may be provided an unrealistic budget or schedule for their work. Having a small team of knowledgeable individuals to provide an estimate by following a defined technique generally results in a closer predictor of actual value than that made by an individual. So again, the message comes through: more heads, more group think means more ideas about how the problem is or solution is broken down, and how it might be designed, or considerations that a single individual might not have thought about. And then updating estimate throughout the work cycle and making this iterative, revisiting your estimates. And I'll talk in a little bit about those key points in a project where that might be helpful, or in an iteration where that might be helpful. So refining them over time, breaking them down and updating them as new assumptions or information come through or discovered will help. Limitations: only as accurate as the level of knowledge about the elements being estimated. Without organizational or local knowledge, estimates can vary widely from the actual values determined later. Using just one estimation method may lead stakeholders to have unrealistic expectations. So, real life. I'm going to talk a little bit about my own experience. And then once we get through this, hopefully leave a little bit of time for you to share ideas and experiences as well. My own estimation bias started when I was a developer. I hadn't had any project management experience. I won't tell you how many years ago that was. And as a developer, I would get asked for estimates. So I started comparing my estimates to my actuals at the end of each project. And what I found was I was always off by about 50% from my original estimate. I started talking to my project manager one day, and he said, "Do you know why that's happening?" And I said, "No." I said, I guess I must not be considering something. He said, "Yeah, you're right." He said, when you start a project, there's the 25% that you probably know. And then there's the 25% that you know that you don't know. And that leaves the bottom of the circle. Can you guess what that is? It's the 50% that you don't know that you don't know. That was my fudge factor. There's a lot of stuff that we don't even realize we don't know when we start our estimations, because we've been asked for, build me a bridge and put lights on it, and it's got to be 3 miles long and do this. And how much is that going to cost? Well, I'm not a builder. I'm not that kind of developer, but I wouldn't be able to give a good estimate. So you have to think about that. So the point is to reduce uncertainty, list the assumptions and constraints, use past experience and historical data, consider industry benchmarking, which means you're out there looking at what similar projects or the industry standards might be. Be careful on industry standards, because if they are provided by a vendor, they might be ideal cases, and they may not understand your organization's complexity. That's one of the biggest lessons in practically every project I've been in, is we go to a vendor, they give us an estimate, and it's based on kind of the ideal workflow and skill set. Perform planning and research, utilize various estimation techniques. Remember that in this estimation, in the estimation techniques that were listed, they're not necessarily an either or. You can use them in combination, or you can use them at different phases of the project to get different levels of confidence as you move forward. And then involve the people who will do the work. I can't emphasize that enough, because they will think of all the components, and they may have a lot of experience in kind of benchmarking their own work to say, oh, gee, I've been looking at all of these interfaces and we average about 200 hours per interface. And so they have some expert knowledge and they're actually going to do the work. So I think the hard part of working with folks that are developers is that it's a little bit of a fearful situation to give an estimate. And so I have to give them permission to estimate and list their assumptions and say, given these assumptions, we know there's a lot you don't know, but given all of these assumptions, if they all come true, what's your estimate? So coaching them through the idea that an estimate is just that, and it comes with a price, which is your uncertainty, and we will update it as we go, can help the team with that. So here is the cone of uncertainty, and I want to credit Constructs. This is a great group here in Washington State, www.constructs.com. I took several classes there when I was a developer. One of them was software estimation in depth. And one of their main points is this cone of uncertainty. At the start of a project, you can't see this very well, but it says initial concept. Initial concept accuracy can go from 0.25 to 4 times the actual estimate. So this is in that sort of rough order of magnitude when you first idealize a project. Your uncertainty level is pretty high, and you can see this sort of dark part of the cone. This is how things can vary. Normally, they don't go well below your estimate. I think we all probably experience this part of the bubble up here, which is where actually, as you go through, if you're not careful about managing the cone of uncertainty, your estimates, the actuals, can go over your estimates by quite a bit. And so the point is, as you progress through time on the project, your goal is to slowly narrow that cone of uncertainty. Here it says initial concept, here it's approved product definition. Here it says marketing requirements complete, and then detailed technical requirements complete, and then detailed design complete. So what I like to do, and you can see I've kind of mapped this out, that it's not until you get the detailed design that you get in that range on a project of 0.9 to 1.10. That's your 10% or 90% confidence level, because that's when you really know what you're going to build and test. So this is really kind of lifted from a project management standpoint, but we can also look at it from a business analyst standpoint. The idea that at the initial concept, you could be 0.25 to 4, approved product definition, 0.5 to 2 times the estimate, marketing requirements, 0.67 to 1.5, and detailed technical requirements are in that 0.80 to 0.25% over under. Any questions about the cone of uncertainty? Okay. So I usually try to think of 3 estimation phases, either in a project or in an iteration. There's the rough order of magnitude estimate at that very beginning, which could vary 0.25 to 4 times your original. that's really kind of at the conceptual level. That's the, gee, I want a unicorn. Steve, you know, I want this to work this way, and we don't know a lot about it. We've done a little bit of research. Budget estimate is really when finance gets involved. And generally they want an estimate that will vary no more than about plus or minus 40%. So I tend to want to estimate a little bit high because there's a lot of information that I don't know, but it can't be too high because it's got to be somewhat realistic. And then finally, the definitive estimate. And as you saw in the cone of uncertainty, you don't really get to this definitive, this plus or minus 5% or maybe 10% until you really know what you're going to build. And that's at the end of the detailed design. And I could imagine if you're going agile and doing sprints or doing some other modified iterative process, that rolling wave estimate is going to be what's immediately in front of you is maybe this definitive estimate. What's a little bit down the road or further down the road with fewer unknowns kind of remains in the budget or ROM estimate pile. So this is what I really, really enjoy is function point analysis estimation. I had a spreadsheet and I am looking for a good one. I lost it somewhere along the way in my career off on a thumb drive someplace, and I have not been able to find it. So the way a function point estimator works is that you create a line, you break it down to a component level, one line per component. You look at the skill levels of the individuals doing the work. You can put an attribute in there to calibrate the estimate based on the skill level of the team. Is this a repeatable process? They've done it all the time, they're very skilled, or they've never done this and it's greenfield and they're going to have to acquire a bunch of skills to do it. On one end of that scale, they can go through that work much faster and your estimates are more accurate. On the other end, it could vary widely and they're likely to take a lot longer doing the work. So you can calibrate the model based on the skill level. You can calibrate it based on the complexity of the component. A way to do that is to use a Fibonacci sequence. If you don't know Fibonacci, it's a pretty easy sequence. You take 1 and 1 and that equals 2. And then you take 2 plus 1 and that equals 3. And then you get 3 plus 2 and that's 5. And it goes up in scale, and you can use this to kind of assign low, medium, high, extra large, XXL, because as you go down that sequence, you get up to like a level of 21 complexity pretty quickly. And you can use those to kind of help people come to an idea of how complex something is. You can put in a confidence level to drive the range, and you can use a confidence level computed based on estimated ranges. So there are various ways you can configure a spreadsheet to give you an estimate. This is an example of a function point calculation. So I'm not going to go into all of the details about function point estimating, but it has various aspects to it. File types referenced, record element type, data element type, how many external outputs, external inquiry. These are function points. And they help calculate the function points. And so as you calibrate it, here's first line says customers. It's a module. The function name is customers. There would be a description. What type is it? It's an ILF, which is an internal logical file. And there are other pieces of information that lead up to the function points. And you can adjust the function points based on some of those other elements that I mentioned and come with your adjusted function point. And then you can assign values to these in terms of the amount of time it takes to do them. So we did this in a prior project. And I'll go into that case study in just a moment. But I want to get through the risks of estimation. I mentioned earlier summing padded estimates. So the sum of the parts may become significantly bigger than the reasonable sum of the whole. So try not to pad or add reserves to individual component estimates. If you need to add reserve because you are talking to finance and they want you to be more confident, then you can add a reserve at the end of your estimation. The danger of believing the experts without weighing organizational experience and skill levels. Experts may not list their assumptions and they may be based on best practices. They may not take into consideration your organization's skill level, documentation, or capabilities. And they may not take into consideration the complexity of your organization or systems. So if you're leaning to the experts, make sure they are taking into consideration these things. What the BABOK doesn't say, at least within the technique chapter for this technique, though it is covered in the BA approach, assumptions or risks, make sure you list them. The more unknowns, the more assumptions, the more risks of variance. When assumptions fail, risks go up, and often so does the cost, timeline, and complexity of the work. And when assumptions fail, recalibrate your estimates. The BABOK does recommend iteratively estimating and keeping them updated, but use your assumptions and reevaluate them regularly to inform the work. Finally, just a quick summary of 2 case studies of projects that I was involved in. One was a provider database, and we came out with an estimate of 44,000 hours. We did this using that function point estimation spreadsheet. It took a couple of, I think it took like 6 to 8 weeks to calibrate the estimation spreadsheet based on an understanding of requirements at a pretty detailed level and an understanding of which modules would generally be needed for the project. So the request was to develop a single provider database from 3 legacy provider databases, estimate the high complexity project without prior expert experience or knowledge. So this was a greenfield project. What we did to prepare, we used a function point estimation spreadsheet. Like I said, it took several months to decompose the information down to a component level. We used PERT estimates for each line item. We calibrated each line item based on the individual skill sets of given teams. We listed our assumptions and constraints and added 25% budgeting contingency after the estimate was derived. And we didn't end up using that contingency because the results were that the actual project was within 5% of the original estimate. In a lot of ways, I think we got lucky, but we also did a lot of hard work, and we had a model that could help us with this. Most of the assumptions remained true through the project, and 10% of the assumptions, about 10% of the assumptions failed, and this was about a 3-year project. So breaking it down, groupthink, lots of planning. The next one is an interface project that was 22,000 hours. The request was to estimate a project to connect legacy systems by developing 35 individual interfaces with an experienced interface team and analogous historical records of similar projects. So this wasn't so greenfield, but things really went in a direction we didn't plan. what we did to prepare is we researched the historical records, listed the assumptions and constraints. We were persuaded to restate our assumptions. They were seen as too pessimistic. The director asked for an external vendor for their estimate, and the vendor cut our estimate in half. The vendor did not list assumptions and didn't analyze the organizational complexity, the state of the legacy systems, or the availability of specifications. So the result was that all reasonably optimistic assumptions failed, including the following. We'll have vendor supplied specifications, vendor supplied design support, internal SMEs who understand the workflow, and internal SMEs who understand what changes could be supported. Our expert in-house knowledge-based estimate turned out to still be true. Actuals came within 3% of our original estimate, not the vendor's estimate. So our internal knowledge, I think we kind of lucked out that our estimate was real. Had we had our assumptions met with these, we would have come in under that 20,000 hour estimate. So lesson, if original risks had been supported in addition to our assumptions, our estimates might have been believed, and we might have found countermeasures to mitigate the issues and gaps earlier in the project. So discussion, we have 4 minutes left. What are your experiences, and does anybody have a magical spreadsheet they'd like to share for function point estimation? Or what are other things, other thoughts about this?
I'll back up your theory that if the vendor doesn't know your organization, they cannot provide an accurate estimate. I've seen it happen too many times, and it's ludicrous.
Yeah, it's a lot of crazy making. The vendor that gave us the estimate said, this is what our standard is for interfaces. And they were actually really only looking within the domain of their product, not all the products that were going to be interfaced with it. So they estimated to the doorstep, and we estimated inside the house. Reference materials and resources, go check out Constructs if you have a moment. They have a wonderful list of courses. They have a lot of Agile stuff. If you haven't heard about Steve McConnell's books, they're great resources for estimation and project management. They have a podcast on YouTube that you can join and participate in. And then, of course, Bob's website is wonderful for getting an overview of all of this information. Bob, do you have any other resources or comments to share with folks around estimation techniques that you'd like to share?
Just one. Can I have the screen for a moment?
Yes. Let's see, stop share.
I'd love to say that you are welcome to present anytime on any subject you want that was spectacular. If for no other reason that now I don't have to talk as much, at least today. All right, come on. All right.
No, you could really tell the experience.
Do you see this screen?
Yes.
If you
Yes.
notice, I always talk about business analysis as the series of loops, right? And those of you who are familiar with the project management OOV know that these are the phases of project management, and these are kind of the concern areas in here. And the project manager or the team, the PMO, sets up the environment in which you're going to do your work. And then the analysis happens between that. So estimation comes up on the part of the project managers guiding the whole project. And ideally, they will work with the BAs to, figure everything out together. So these are definitely skills that both parties kind of need. And also, when you're doing pure BA work, there are a lot of sub-estimations within that. So there are estimations for the entire engagement, how long it takes you to do the work, and also how many materials you're going to consume. And then as you're doing the design, there are all kinds of estimations associated with that. So there's a total hand-holding going on in that. Do you have slides you'd be willing to share with everyone? Maybe we can put them on the chapter website.
Definitely.
That would be appreciated. That was a very good presentation, Jim.
Yeah.
You
Thank
ought to get paid for things like this.
Well,
Okay,
the payoff is we all get our CBAP or certification we're trying to get. And
Yeah.
we increase the value of business analysis as we move forward.
yes, we do. And we help everybody.
Yeah, has his hand up.
I think those are clapping.
Oh, I got you. Okay, thank you.
Yes, they are clapping for you, sir. Okay, so next week we will work on the techniques that we didn't get to today, item tracking workshops, focus group, and another technique that we haven't yet decided on. We do have let me share my screen real quick. We do have a spreadsheet of the techniques that are available for people to take. Let's see. Nope, not that one. It's this one. So if you're interested in any of these techniques, I'm going to flash through them real quick. We've got a couple that have already been taken. These are the ones that were going to be done today. But if you're interested in presenting on any of these techniques or any of these techniques, just let me know through LinkedIn. And all I need from you is 5 to 20 minutes of what the technique is based on what the BABOK says. If you have any experience on your own of using the technique, we'd like for you to go into that as well. Because number one, we're teaching people how to pass the CBAP or one of the certifications for the BABOK. But number two, we want everyone to be able to be better BAs. And the more we learn, the better we are. So if you're interested in any of those, contact me through LinkedIn and I will put your name on it. Tell me what date you want it and tell me approximately how long you think it will take you. If you want to do a practice run a couple of times before, that's fine. This is great practice for public speaking. It's also a good thing to have to be able to put in your back pocket and say, I presented to the IIBA. So we'll take care of that next week. Contact me through LinkedIn between now and then should you want to present either next week or in the future. And we will see you all here next week. Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Okay.
Thea, can you send
Thank you.
me that spreadsheet?
The spreadsheet is in our Teams share, not Teams share, whatever our share, Google Drive share.
All right.
And you should be able
Yeah,
to
it's
get
in with the recordings, Bob. You should have
Yeah.
rights to them.
All right.
you and I
Everyone should be able to see it, but I think you and Thea should be able to edit it.
we can edit it. So we will edit on anyone's behalf that would like to participate. Okay, guys, I'll see y'all next week. Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Later.